Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. I am here with Quentin Stroud. This is season 6, episode 10. We are at 10, and this one is going to be on the second dynamic and what the second dynamic is and how it relates to relationships and marriage. That's a working title. We'll get it figured out when we do the post production on a title for the podcast, but that's close enough, don't you think?
Yeah, marriage, relationships, however you flow.
Yep. All right. So, what is the second dynamic, Quentin?
So the second dynamic is the dynamic of um relationship, is a dynamic of sex. It's the dynamic where you have the actual sexual act. It's where we do what we do. And then you have B, you have the product of sex, which is the raising and rearing of children.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the second dynamic, you can also call it the family dynamic, the
Mom and
sexual dynamic, the
dad.
relationship dynamic. Yeah, all that.
Mhm. Yep.
All that becomes a part of your second dynamic. And we all exist across our dynamics simultaneously. Um, some more important than others in different parts of our lives. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. The urge to survival through sex, the furthering on of the race through copulation, and the side rails of that is the second dynamic. To our listeners who may be listening to this podcast for the first time and are unfamiliar with what the dynamics are, there the first four of the eight is the first dynamic is you and your body. The second is what we just covered. The third is groups. You could consider independent Scientology as your third dynamic group, or it could be your group at work, or maybe you're on a little, not a little league team, but a softball team or something. That's a third dynamic group as well. It could be your district of voters. It could be that book club you go to. That's the third dynamic. Fourth dynamic is public at large, all of us on planet Earth, um, everybody. So those are the first four dynamics. Uh, it's also important to note that the exchange, which we call exchange by
Mm-hmm.
dynamics, which is a policy letter that was actually created by Candy Swanson, who was one of the original class eights. She lives in Hawaii now. And she gave it to LRH and said, you can put your name on it. She also did prepare a past ethics conditions PL too, and submitted them to him at the same time on the ship. And she was the author, and she created this where exchange by dynamics was, what is your first dynamic give your second dynamic? What is your second dynamic give your first? What is your second dynamic give your third? And what is your third give your second? It's so on and so forth. So it's very, very
Mm-hmm.
important to understand that there is an exchange between your dynamics. You can't just live on the first dynamic and expect to have a second dynamic and have it do well. So you
Right.
have to make sure that there's this ebb and flow and keep the exchange in. And
Mm-hmm.
exchange means, what are you doing for your wife? You have 2 nights a week where you have date nights, or you go do something on the weekend and then you do something on Wednesday. That works really well for a lot of people because it can't just be the weekend unless you're just really busy, because you need to put it there on the second
Mm-hmm.
dynamic. Just like the first dynamic, if you don't brush your teeth and you don't take care of yourself, it's not going to be there for very long. So that's what exchange means by dynamics.
Well, and there's this Dr. Miles Monroe who talks about he talks about the term in male and female, masculine, feminine, or whatever. But he says that like um, women need affection, men need sex, right? And he said the masculine energy provides an affect to create an effect, right? This is how he
Mm-hmm.
says it. And we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna go. We're gonna get to this a little bit later about
Mm-hmm.
this whole thing. He applies an affect to create an effect, and he says so. The affection that you do, you just mentioned about taking your wife to dinner, buying her flowers, doing certain things, these gentle touches throughout the day or whatever. These affections can create an effect um, in in your partner, and it creates is this whole thing where we actually start to now exchange with each other these opportunities to give each other what we need and want,
Hmm.
which it gets very deep when we go
Absolutely.
into it later. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of which, it's important to note that the Scientology and Dianetic axioms, some of which we went into in season 5, they can be found in Scientology 0 to 8, the Book of Basics, as well as a couple of the other books mentioning cause and effect. And in order to play a game per the, I believe it's the Dianetic axioms, in order to play a game, you have to agree to become aberrated, whatever that game is. And the dynamics, all 8 of them, are a game, and you choose how to play
There
that
you
game.
go.
And if you don't play that game, well, the game becomes play you.
And we get in trouble. Hold on a second, because that's true. We get in trouble when we say stuff like this, right? Like, oh my gosh, you're saying love is a game? You're saying relationship is a game? This marriage is a game to you? Well, let's take a look, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I literally do this in my 2D flows. I'm like, let's take a look. A game, per LRH, a game consists of freedoms, barriers, and purposes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in order to, life is a game, we already know that, but let's really take a look at how and in what areas are we playing these games. So look at the second dynamic. There's a purpose for this. There's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why you're doing this. There's a reason why you're with that person, or you guys are trying to have children, or whatever is going on in your flow. There's a reason for this. There's a purpose behind it, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
then there's also certain freedoms that you guys get to enjoy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also certain barriers that we ain't crossing. What's we call it? My boundaries.
Right.
Boundary, you
Boundaries.
know,
Mm-hmm.
right. Now they're calling them deal breakers. My deal breakers,
Yeah.
you know. Have
Yeah.
certain deal breakers. So it's like there's certain barriers to this. There's certain freedoms. Listen, be you, do your thing, be ambitious, be driven, do what you got to do, make your money. Let's build an empire together. We have all these things of saying something about it. But what we're really talking about is we're about to enter into this game together.
That's right. And that's where agreement comes in. Now, agreement,
Mhm.
interestingly enough, because agreement sounds like, well, okay, it's just agreement. We agree, whatever, X. But the thing is that a Thetan has to agree to become aberrated in order to play that game of freedoms, boundaries, and purposes. Okay. Because if you play chess with yourself, you play checkers with yourself, it's not a very fun game because you know what you're going to do in the next move. And that's why when you agree to become aberrated, you agree that you don't know everything about it. You selectively give, much like we do on the tone scale, but we'll get to that in a minute. So you're selectively saying, I don't know everything. I don't know what he or she is going to do. And this is why the second dynamic, because of its natures, becomes so aberrative, because you have to become an effect in order to have a second dynamic. If you can't be the effect on the second dynamic per L or H, this is in the second dynamic book, which is no longer in publication by the church and hasn't been for a good 40 years. There's a section on it, page 60 in the second dynamic book. You can download it from the ao-gp.org website in the multimedia library. Page 60, sex and cause and effect, which is from the handbook of pre-clears. I can't quite read that. It's 100. What the page number? That doesn't matter. Anyway, it's from the handbook for pre-clears, and he talks about this cause and effect. You want to read your favorite parts on this?
So he talks about this thing, and it really stands out because when you think about aberration, when you think about why the second dynamic gets so wonky, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
It's like you say, it's because of the agreement that we have made either with this individual, like this person, or the agreement that we've made across the line of the second dynamic, across the second dynamic. So it says here, let me see, where does it start? Okay, so it says, blaming yourself or others for being cause is to deny yourself full control of your facsimiles, of your mental machinery, right? You say somebody calls something, you make them responsible. They are then cause. This is a powerful position. It ends up with your being given them control, I'm sorry, having given them control over a facsimile or many facsimiles. If you blame somebody hard enough and long enough, you have kept on electing them as cause until they are much more powerful than yourself. And he gives examples: if you blame your mother, if you blame your father, if like these kind of blame things happen, right?
Mhm.
So he goes on to say, you blame somebody, you elect them as cause. You elect them as cause.
Mhm.
This makes you an effect of the cause. As an effect, you are thus placed well down the tone scale. You desire to be an effect in some quarter, and thereafter you may continue to be an effect and go on down the scale to the point where you may develop psychosomatic illness and da da da. So this is really interesting, because how many times have we been in relationships? How many times have we had second dynamic 2D flows, and he did this to me, she did this to me, you cheated on me, you blah 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 blah, and we've kind of put this blame game playing thing
Mhm.
in our second dynamic, right?
Mhm.
So you then get out of that relationship with that person thinking, listen, I'm free of him. I'm about to start over. I'm about to have a whole new life, right? And you get right back in. You get right back into it. We talked about this before. I said
Yeah.
same script, different cast, right?
Mhm.
You get right back into the same thing because you've kept electing others as blame. You've kept electing others as cause and was not really willing to be cause or be effect in that sense, where it becomes this exchange, right? This back and forth. And to the degree that that is thrown off, to the degree that you are no longer willing to be something in this relationship, that's where you're going to start to have the problems.
Mhm. Right.
It's going to start to go off.
Yeah. Well, and then that's why agreement is so important in what's real for you and what's real for your partner,
Hmm.
is because
Yeah.
this kind of is, well, we get into this in a minute in the conditions, but it's important to note that you have to be pan determined as an individual, which doesn't mean I, me, mine on the first dynamic, but you both have to be pan determined and you have to do this ebb and flow. Who's going to be effect on this? Who's going to be a cause? Are we going to do this together as a team and we're going to be causative as a team? To me, that's the most non-aberrative
Hmm.
viewpoint, is where you're completely in agreement on something and you've communicated about it and said, okay, we're going to do this as a team. These are going to be your hats. These are going to be your job responsibilities, whatever you want to call them. These are mine, and we're going to work together as a tiny little org board of husband and wife, and this is how we will manage our second dynamic. And or
Hmm.
third, if you own a business together, or businesses together and everything like that, there have to be certain responsibilities that are put out there, which is being pan determined. As long as you've communicated enough about it and you have agreement makes pan determinism for both of you, to where they take care of this, you take care of that, and you complement each other.
Yeah. Well, and to really get a full understanding of this pattern, because I loved when I first discovered pan-determinism in the book Dianetics 55. I
Mhm.
absolutely love this concept, right? Because we say it in different ways, but we say something like, walk a mile in the other person's shoes. Try to see it from the other person's point of view, right? And
Mhm.
this is the idea of pan-determinism. But what I like about Scientology is that it takes it to, the nth power, right? Because LRH doesn't just say consider the other person's point of view. The way he says it is actually becoming the other person. Like you actually step into a state of beingness, of being the other person, and walk a mile in another person's shoes, right? You actually start to become as that person is. And I was having a conversation in my relationship about the two becoming one, and not from a perspective of, we're merged together and we're not individuated and individuals and can do our own thing or whatever, but more from the perspective of we are of one mind, of on one accord, right? This
Right.
accord thing, and we exist in this. So what you were saying, but what I love about pendeterminism on the second dynamic is you actually, this is how I say it, you represent the other person, or you represent,
Right.
re
Right.
hyphen present the other person. And
Right.
so I might not have to be at the grocery store, but baby, you know what I like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I got. You know what I want. Just go ahead and grab it. Oh,
Hmm.
but do you want to? You know what I like.
Yeah. Well, and that like we were saying right before the podcast is there's no better feeling in the world when you're in a second dynamic that they've got your back, you've got theirs. You're on the same page, you're in communication, and like I'm in session and something is going on outside of session and I can't be disturbed. Lisa's got it. She got it under control. No problem. I don't have any attention on it, whatever, you support their decisions because you are so in ARC and so in KRC that it's like, okay, they know how to handle this. And even if they make a judgment call that you might not have made or you would have done something differently, you just look at it and you go, I support you 100%. I get
There
why
you
you
go.
made that decision. That's how that has to be. And this is a good way to lead into the conditions on the second dynamic.
Mhm. Yeah,
Because
absolutely. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, that's right. Go ahead.
No, no. I was going to say, because when it comes to going through these flows, right? When it comes to going through these way of doing things, obviously, when you're playing a game, sometimes you're winning, sometimes you're losing, whatever the case may be, right? Sometimes things go up and down.
Hmm.
And when we look at when we really look at what condition we're in, and we look at, like you said, this as an org board
Hmm.
of its own making, this postulated org board that we've created here, this family, this household, this marriage, this relationship. When you look at it from that perspective, you gotta apply the conditions to it. I am quick to pull out some conditions. If you're like, oh no, we in you in danger, girl. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm quick to pull out some conditions because it really helps you to get back on track and move through some things. I
Hmm.
think, what's that quote you said about LRH said about marriages fail?
Oh, well, he says that basically the primary reason that marriages fail is because they never get out of non-existence. They never
Hmm.
truly find out. And you can even back it up to, it says find a calm line. Okay. Have you really gotten in communication with your significant other? And this goes deeper than that. You go, oh, well, yeah, sure. No, 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 no. Listen to what I'm saying. Okay. No mansplaining. Okay. You have to, and I'm gonna go on a little sidebar here. I told you I was going to talk about this. Gonna go on a little sidebar here for a minute. If for one moment you're a male independent Scientologist, you're a male Scientologist and you're in the church and you're listening to this podcast, and you sit there and you think that you and your wife are on two different planes of existence because she's in a woman's body and you're in a man's body, and well, she's a woman. No, 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 no. You're both beings in a body. Just because the body has a particular gender and your body has a particular gender doesn't mean that they are subordinate to you. This is not the 1950s. You need to think about that and not look at women as objects. You need to think about that and look at women as equals. And if you want something to get done, 9 times out of 10, a woman can get it done better than a man can. You're going to have to front up to that. That's my opinion. And there are an awful lot of Scientologists who are horrible, horrible, horrible sexists. And I will tell you that anything outside of what LRH did with Scientology, an independent Scientology, most of the people that got those things done for him that he couldn't do himself were done by women. And these women had confront, these women had communication, they had the skills far beyond the men in the organization. You want something done, have a woman do it because they'll do it right. And you got to respect your spouse and not treat them as a subordinate. And this goes beyond cause and effect and agreeing to become aberrated. You have to treat them as a spiritual being in a body that just has a different gender than yours. And if this is something you can't have, I completely respect that and I understand that. Just hear me out. Okay. Think about it. Treat them the way you want to be treated, because otherwise that's the definition of an overt. If you're doing something to somebody that you wouldn't want to have done to you, if your wife looked at you and went, well, he is a man after all. Okay. I get it.
They
But
do.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't like it. So don't treat your wife that way. And don't be a sexist, because if you're a sexist, you can't be a Scientologist. You really aren't. That's just a fact, because you're not looking at things from the viewpoint of being a spiritual being. You're dropping down the tone scale and looking at it, well, she has a vagina and she has breasts. That's different. She needs to be treated differently. And, she doesn't know what she's talking about and all that stuff. Knock that shit off. Just knock it off. It's not cool. And you're not really doing a proper be, do, have. Grant yourself beingness, grant them beingness. Okay. End
Well,
rant.
no, this is a good point. This is a really good point. I think we should definitely talk about it because obviously, outside of Scientology, just in the world in general, this exists. Like there's this double
Double
standard, as it
standard.
were, that exists between both the sexes, right?
Yeah.
You said about men not objectifying women and looking at women as objects, as I'm assuming you talk about as it relates to sex.
Mm-hmm.
And I often have to tell women oftentimes too, not looking at men as objects as banks,
Yeah.
like so, or ATMs, and so it's like the idea is that we talk about the exchange by dynamics and first dynamic to second dynamic, but even within a relationship, there is levels of exchange. There are roles and functions. There are things that make like an org board.
Yeah.
If you're on
Absolutely.
the org board, this is your division. This is the vision you handle. That doesn't necessarily make one superior than the other or subordinate to the other or whatever. But what it creates is it creates order. And we talked about this before when I said that love, order is the first law of love, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And creating an org board within your marriage, as it were, or your relationship is a good place to start to find out what could you do, what can you accomplish, what are you best at, like your wife might be better at money than you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Delegate that authority. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and let her handle the treasury department. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever.
Honey,
And,
you got Div 3.
and conversely, if she has some OWs on money,
Right. Or
swiping the
she's
credit card and
PTS.
hiding the receipt.
Yeah. 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 No, 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 no. I got this. Okay. I'll
Exactly.
change the password on QuickBooks,
Exactly. You kind of create this understanding, but that's also where the pandeterminism comes in at, right? So, obviously sexism is totally not okay. Racism, as Scientologists, totally
Yeah.
not okay. And
Absolutely.
we definitely um speak against those kinds of blatant uh considerations around these things, right?
Yeah.
And understanding too that in a relationship, depending on how you were raised, depending on where you came from, depending on your background, I'm from Alabama, I'm a country boy, and so depending on where you came from, there are certain things that we consider to be the social norms, right? There's certain things we
Right.
consider to be social norms. And if your wife doesn't agree with that, then she just don't agree with it, right? It's like, no, I don't agree that I need to cook dinner every night. Okay.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We have to figure out what we're gonna do on the nights that you don't want to cook dinner, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
yeah,
that comes down to getting in communication. That's how we got there, is that
right.
getting in communication doesn't just mean that you get in communication and you tell them, okay, this is what I want. It's also getting
No.
in communication and saying, okay, what is it you need and want from me? What do I need and want from you? And you have to get that information. And it's going to take a longer time than you might think, because
Okay.
you got tone scale, tone level, ARC. What can they talk about? Uh what can you talk about, depending on where you're at on the bridge and everything like that. If you have to have a proper tone level between the two of you, because if it isn't, you're higher toned than they are, or they're higher toned than you are, that's what causes marriages to break up, because it becomes intolerable to be
Unbearable.
around somebody
Mhm.
who's bringing you down the tone scale, or they're bringing you down. They're bringing you down the tone scale, or vice versa. So you
Right.
have to make sure that you pick someone who has as close of a tone level to yours, which is trickier than it sounds. But that also monitors how you can communicate with them and how they can communicate with you. That's why the tone level comes first. Now, to get to this point of why you need to do the non-existence formula with the 2D is because if you don't, you're going to end up in a danger condition. Okay. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be a very dangerous condition. You're going to fall down, maybe it'll look good and okay, we're in affluence, and then the honeymoon is over. And then all of a sudden, there you are in danger
Hmm.
because you didn't apply the right condition in the first place. And then that's going to lead to 4 conditions down: doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. And when in doubt, then you have to look at it and go, okay, did I make the right move? We've all been there on the second dynamic. So you absolutely positively have to find out what's needed and wanted, do, produce, and present it. And that's the long and the short of it. If you don't, you're gonna have trouble.
And this is where, because we have on here relationship and communication, and you brought up communication here, and I think it just is noteworthy to kind of segue into that a little bit, because what happens if a person doesn't know what they want in a relationship? Like when you're talking to a person, you're dating somebody, and you know me, Jonathan, I got my way of doing things, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I ask very succinct questions, very clear questions that I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking for answers to. And um it's important. So like I have a dating game that I play. One of the dating games is called I Come From a Place. And it's basically where you say, I come from a place where my mother and my parents used to kiss us every day before we left for school. We used to say
Mm-hmm.
goodbye and kiss each other. So like physical affection was really important to me.
Right.
I come from a place where, cooking was, I'm from the South. So cooking was a show of love and affection. It was
Mm-hmm.
every time I walked to my grandmother's house, baby, you hungry? Go in there and get you something to eat. You know, it was, and before, how you doing, before, how was your day, it was always, baby, go in there and get you something to eat, you hungry? Like it was a way of showing like I want to take care of you. And so for me, my experience with that, I come from that place where feeding me, showing me affection or showing me love through food was a way of expressing that. It wasn't enforced or anything, it was just an opportunity to eat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we go on and on and on, but I come from a place, is a really good dating game that I play. The other one I play is called Either Or. This is talk about love is a game, relationship is a game, right? So I
Right.
play these dating games. So
Mm-hmm.
the dating game called Either Or, and you say either house or condo. Oh, I want
Mm-hmm.
a house. Okay, good. Either night or day. Oh, I'm a night owl.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn more about your partner through
Right.
playing this game, and you can
Getting
come
out
up
of
with an
non-e.
infinite number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you come up with an infinite number of needs and wants, because some people, and I'm saying this for real, some people really don't go into relationships knowing what they're wanting, knowing what they're looking for. They
Yeah.
have these arbitraries. I want honesty. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. It's
You
pretty
know,
general.
yeah. And I think that if we really communicate about it, because the communication formula is what we have here. Communication formula, what's that? Cause, distance, effect, with
Intention,
duplication at the
attention, and
effect point, with
duplication. Yep.
intention and attention. Yeah,
Yep.
with intention, attention, and duplication.
Axiom 28.
If I don't, if I, you could have told me 10 times, but if I didn't duplicate it, it was not a full communication.
Right.
Like
You got to make sure.
and, and either A, there was some attention that was off. You didn't intend to get it across the way you thought you did. Or B, there was some attention that was off that I wasn't paying attention to you because I was watching the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
it's it's like we really have to really prioritize how to make these relationships work. This is, like it says it, this is one of the most aberrative of the dynamics, because of the affinity and the reality that the ARC that exists here,
Mm-hmm.
because of how close this is, how much survival is embedded into this dynamic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And ARC has everything to do with the second dynamic. You've got to, what are the realities? What are your realities? What are their realities?
Come from a place.
Well, right. And as far as affinity goes, um, I come from a place where there's unconditional love.
Yeah.
And they go, what's that? And you go, uh-oh.
Never had that before.
Never had that before. Okay. And you've got to handle that and get in communication with them and let them know that this is your reality on this. And that helps raise the affinity where maybe they can have unconditional love if it's important to you, if it's real to them, if it's important to them, because that's what ARC is all about. And then you've got KRC above that: knowledge, responsibility, and control and power, to the degree that you can handle and be in power on the second dynamic, to the degree that you have all of the information. If you don't have all the information, you're going to be a lot more at effect than you are cause. That's for sure.
Right.
For sure. So you've got to get out of non-existence and get into ARC with the person and find out what's needed and wanted. And that takes time. It isn't anything that you can rush through or anything like that. It is quantity and quality. It is not quantity or quality. And that's going to take some times, only, like Elvis says in that really famous song of his from the 60s, only fools rush in. You cannot rush into a relationship. You have to take a long time to get to know them, find out what their tone levels are, not just their social, hi honey, how are you, but their chronic, how are they with you at 1 a.m? Then you're going to know. 2 a.m, 3
So
a.m, when you wake them up and you get up early to go to work and you drop something on the floor and they don't get up until 9, then you're going to know what their chronic tone level is. That's a good way to do it.
let me tell you, and I play a little bit of a different game. Or should I play my game differently, in that I think that time is a consideration. So I don't necessarily work from the time angle, a lot of time getting to know a person, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to move kind of quickly,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe because I'm very, uptone, and I'm very, low comm lag, I'm very A to B, like I'm like boom, 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 boom. What is this? What is that? What is this? What is that? And I call things out. Like I'm very clear, like if something is out, what is it called? Not out qual. Out points. Yes,
Uh-huh.
out points.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem saying that's wrong song. That's an out point.
Mm-hmm.
That's out.
Right.
You know, and
You
what
don't
that
want to get
does,
married?
and
See ya.
yeah, oh yeah, you don't want kids. Oh, good meeting you. So good. Like I'm very clear about it, because number one, I know what I want, but number two, it I think what it does is it allows us to know the other person in a reasonable period of time, not necessarily a long time, but a reasonable period of time, and get those pertinent questions answered. Of course, we're ever evolving beings, right? We're
Right.
dynamical beings, right? What do you say? Multi-dynamical beings. And so we're going to keep on advancing. So I'm always going to be getting to know you. But what I need to know now is what I need to know now in
Yeah.
order to move forward, in order to make a decision.
Right.
And so I think that by really understanding communication, by understanding the affinity reality community, go back and listen to the podcast we did on ARC and KRC. By really understanding those two triangles, you really get to know a person. And like you said before, understanding their tone level, like their chronic tone level. If you know you're a pretty conservative guy and you dealing with somebody who is constantly in fear, like what?
Right.
Like no, we need to make a decision. We need to do something. Like something needs to happen. I
Right.
got all the information. Why
Right.
why can't we move forward on
Right.
this?
Don't rush me. It
Yeah.
scares me. Okay.
Yeah. I
How
don't
many
feel
times have we seen
safe.
this? I did. Right. 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 and it always in the beginning of relationships. I won't mention any names or anything like that, but it was 3 weeks in for this person, and they were talking to me and they were saying she's yelling at me and screaming at me and coming out here and all this, and I just said, okay, hold up, tell me that again, slower. Okay, all right, so how long have you been in this relationship? 3 weeks. Hmm. Okay. And my first thought is, if this is happening now,
Mhm.
what's going to be happening later? You
Morgan
have
Freeman,
you have to ask yourself.
you gotta know it. Morgan Freeman in this movie, I can't remember the name of the movie, but he has this famous line in the movie where he says, talking about this couple, and they were fighting on the beach, and he was sitting back on the porch looking over the water, and they were going in, and he looked at his wife and he said, "The ending is always at the beginning."
Hmm.
And that
Yeah,
was when
yeah.
I first heard that, that stuck with me, boy. Because I look at it from the beginning. The ending
Hmm.
is always at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. Present
So
behaviors predict future behaviors in an exponential fashion because they're trying to keep it under wraps as best they can, as a general rule. And that's
yes.
and it's just like when you're hiring somebody. So the first thing you want to ask is, so why are you unemployed?
Mhm.
Why are you looking for a job? So why are you looking for a new band to be in? That type of
Mhm.
thing. You have to ask yourself these questions, and you're not being critical, but you have to look at, okay, why are they single? Okay, so you were single for 7 or 8 years. Why? What
Yeah.
happened right before that caused you to be single for 7 or 8 years? So you
I was
have to
so damaged.
right. So you have to find this stuff out because, like LRH says, as a CS, know before you go. You have to get metered interviews. I mean, I'll go as far as to say, if you're going to get into a relationship with somebody, have them get on our website and have them do an OCA, a personality test. I can't give you their personality test, but they can.
They
It's
can.
like a prenup. Will you do a personality
And they
test?
must. For
And
me.
yeah, right. Because I
And they
mean,
must.
and you'll be able to see, are they low on the left? Are they out of valence? Are they low out of the right? Are they crazy? Are they both?
Mhm.
And you can look at the two charts and go, okay, these guys are oil and water. No, 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 no.
Yep.
This isn't going to work. Personality test is a great gauge of that. And it's the same thing like with a prenup. If they won't sign a prenup and you agree on the terms of the prenup, well, now you know what's going on here.
Man, let me tell you something. You talking some good game because for I'm telling you, like we have this thing, and I don't know how many people actually practice it, but I know in some states in America, um, before you can get a marriage license, you have to have like a medical checkup, you have to have STD testing, you have to
Yeah.
have all that kind of stuff or
Yep.
whatever before you get a marriage license. But nobody requires a mental health check. Nobody requires a OCA personality test. Nobody says, let's take a look at what's really going on up under the hood. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, we got to do both. Like I need to know what I need to know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I've actually broke up with somebody over a bad OCA, but I have definitely
It gave you pause.
made well no, no, I've actually said like, listen, if we're gonna move forward, we're gonna have to get on some courses. We're gonna have to get some, you know what I mean?
Oh,
We're gonna have to get some
absolutely.
help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that brings up another point. That brings up another point that we're here is, and this is more of a word to the wise and experience. If you're getting into a relationship from the viewpoint of, I can help this person. I I
Oh,
I, I can make their life so much better. They need my help. Think twice. Think twice. You
mhm.
shouldn't be doing that. Okay. Because you're already in a lower condition before you ever started, because you shouldn't be doing that. You should be with somebody who is in a similar, and this is an important point, is in a similar ethics condition to you. Because if you think
Yes.
that they need your help, chances are They're in a much lower condition on the first dynamic than you are. And then you're going to be doing the whole tone level thing of a higher tone selectively giving. And
Right.
you're going to be sorry down the road.
Right. I used to say it this way. I need a partner, not a project.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's sort of like from a business standpoint. I mean, you have these businesses who buy debt. They actually buy debt to collect
Mhm,
on it. Okay.
mhm.
That's what you're doing. You're buying debt in a relationship because,
Emotional.
yeah, right. I mean,
Mhm.
across the boards, emotional,
Yeah.
uh, possessional,
Spiritual.
spiritual. I mean,
Mhm.
you just might as well be saying, okay, you know what? I'm in affluence and I'm going to go down to treason.
And by liability.
Right, right,
Right.
right, right. Treason. Why on the first dynamic? Why would you do that to yourself? Why
Yeah.
would you do that to yourself? Now you can tell somebody, you know what? We're going to date. Why don't you do some courses? If they're
Yeah.
PTS, especially
I
if they're
like you.
PTS. I like you. I think you should do this. We can date and you can go on course and everything. Do that. Do that. And if they're not interested, they're not interested. Okay. You have your
And they ain't
answer.
available.
And they're right.
Right.
And
I was
right, right. They're not available. They're not available because if they're not interested, what is that? It's out reality. It's not
yes.
ARC. There is an affinity there. They're not willing to accept it. I mean, I'll give you an example. A person I know, I won't use any names or anything like that, got on dating sites and said that they were a Scientologist. I mean, if it was a montage in a movie, it would just be a door closing in their face, a door closing in their face, a door closing in their face, on and on and on and on. It's like 30 something times
Mhm.
because there wasn't any reality there based off of the false data on the subject of Scientology. Oh, I don't want to have anything to do with that. That's all you
Mm.
need to know right there. And if you're afraid, I'm almost done. If you're
Mhm.
afraid to tell somebody that you are an independent Scientologist or you're a Scientologist and you're still in the church and you listen to this, you need to reevaluate. Okay. You need to reevaluate because you are a potential trouble source because you're afraid to tell people your beliefs, your ARC on the first dynamic. Even, don't even get into a relationship with somebody that doesn't have the willingness to either be interested, maybe take some courses and stuff like that. It's not going to work. And if you
Right.
get auditing while you're in that relationship with them, and this is an important point as well, you need to make sure that they get their butt up the tone scale too and they get audited. You can't just get auditing yourself and say, oh, well, the wife, she's not really interested. It's not gonna work because you're going to start resenting each other more because your higher tone level, you're going to start resisting going down the tone scale to them. And it's oil and water. It's just not going to work. So you have to take these things into
Mhm.
consideration. There's an awful lot. That's why we're doing this podcast, is to get it across. Trust me, I've done it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Hear me out. These words should be tattooed on the inside of your cranium. Always, always, always find somebody with a similar reality, affinity, communication, and understanding as yourself, because it is a hard road to hoe to try and get them to come to your side if their ARC is something completely different. There, I'm done.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you really lean into that in a good way because let me say something. Growing up as, in my particular spiritual tradition in my background, they had no problem with saying, you got to be equally yoked. Be ye not unequally yoked with unbelievers, is what the scripture
Yeah,
says. Be
yeah,
ye not unequally yoked with unbelievers.
basically, yeah,
And what I say is, I have what's called my 5 pillars, and my first pillar is spiritual compatibility. What I say is, we don't have to necessarily be the same religion, because Scientology might be totally new to them or whatever. We don't have to necessarily be the same religion, but we do have to be spiritually compatible, right? And if I take an interest in you and your thing, if you want to celebrate Christmas, if you want to, have a bar mitzvah, if you want to do whatever your thing is, if you want to observe Ramadan, whatever. If I'm taking an interest in your thing, you're going to have to take an interest in my thing.
Right.
You feel me? And,
Hmm.
and that goes back to that exchange thing we talked about earlier. And so when it becomes so real, like my 2D is Catholic. I've gone to Catholic mass and I've gone to churches and we've had Christmas things together and we've done stuff like that. It's fine. It's wonderful. I appreciate you inviting me to this function. I can have some cake. And, and at the same time, when it's time to go on course, don't give me no back. Don't give me
Hmm.
no back talk. Like, okay, I went to the church thing. Let's go on course. No problem.
Right.
Wonderful. But I'm saying all this, and I'm being a little funny about it because it's a game, right? But at the same time, I think what he said is very, very true. If you cannot speak your truth and operate in your truth in your relationship, what are you doing? Like, what
Right.
what is it about?
Why are you there to begin with? Because I mean, ultimately, you're on a withhold.
Yeah. LRH said in Dianetics on Love and Marriage, he says probably no single subject in the concern of man has received as much attention as love. He goes on to say it has been discovered that there are three kinds of love between man and woman. The first is covered under the law of affinity and is the affection with which mankind holds mankind. The second is sexual selection and is a true magnetism between partners. And then the third is compulsive love, he uses in air quotes, compulsive love dictated by nothing more reasonable than aberration. And then he ends off that saying Dianetics classifies this kind of love as reactive mind partnership. Here is a meeting of minds, but the minds are on the lowest computational level possessed by man. Driven together by compulsion, men and women mate who will find in that mating nothing more but sorrow and reduction of their hopes. Man, when I read that,
Hmm.
that blew my mind.
Yeah. Words to live by or perish by.
We're talking about the sex dynamic, right?
Right.
And so, uh, as Scientologists, sex is a very interesting consideration across a whole bunch of different lines, right? A whole bunch of different viewpoints. My question is, and you might be able to help me better with this, is sex more of a messed body deal, or is sex more of a theta quality? Or does it have more of a theta quality? What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, I can only speak from my viewpoint. I know that sex changed dramatically for me uh, after I got up on the OT levels, and I found that I had to step down into the body to copulate, type of a
Mhm.
thing. And once I understood that, I'm like, okay, all right, this makes sense. But before it all seemed kind of like just one whole thing instead
Mm.
of separate things. I mean, aesthetics is a wonderful thing. It's high on the tone scale when you see an aesthetic man or a woman, and you're like, wow, they're really beautiful, type of thing. But
Right.
it's also safe to say that on this planet, because of aesthetics, you have to realize that to the degree that a body is aesthetic is to the degree that you're probably going to be dealing with an individual that has a significant amount more aberration than somebody who's just butt ugly.
Is that right? Yeah.
You know why?
Well. Why? Go ahead.
Well, because who does a man hit on in a bar? Does he hit on the butt ugly woman, or does he hit on the beautiful woman? Now, if he's got beer goggles,
Somebody he considers
okay,
beautiful.
that's
Yeah.
fine. That's then there isn't any difference. But the more aesthetic people are, the more aberrated they tend to be. That is so patently obvious. Now, it's not 100%, but it's something you got to know, because I mean, you're going to be you yourself. You're going to have more aberrations on it. If she's a 10 and she says, I'm going to go out with the girls tonight and we're going to go clubbing. Wait, hold up. You're what? Because she could get anybody she wants. And then
Right.
that's where the aberration enters in. Is because, are you comfortable in your position? Do you think you're handsome enough? And this is something where you have to get out of the conditions, and you have to realize whether this person has integrity and they're not going to stray and all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And the doors open for beautiful people. That's why they put beautiful people in movies. They don't put ugly people
Mm-hmm.
in movies unless it's a role that's supposed to be an ugly person, because it doesn't sell. And this is an unfortunate aspect, and has everything to do with sex as a theta, flow, or mest. Is,
Mm.
what are the qualities that you're looking at? Do they have integrity? Because if they're beautiful and they don't have any integrity, they can be as beautiful as can be. You
Mm-hmm.
got nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Because it doesn't matter to them, because they're so beautiful that, well, I can just get another guy. I mean, you see that
Right.
all the time, both with men and women. They're just, well, because they don't have any integrity, because they never learned integrity, because they were given two aces instead of a bunch of threes in
Mm.
their hand. And so they look at life through a different lens. Now, that said, there are some very, very aesthetic people who are incredibly high in integrity, and
Of course.
they excel and they do well. So it's very difficult to differentiate between sex as a theta flow or a mess flow. And these are some of the variables that you have to take into consideration: is aesthetics versus practicality versus integrity, that type of a thing. Is it mess that you're looking at, or is it that they really trip your trigger, and like LRH said, there's a magnetism.
That's where I was going.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's just because they're beautiful, stop before you start, because it's just going to be aberrative. Every relationship I was in, because it was based off of aesthetics, just a total train wreck. Just a total train wreck.
Yeah.
There's got to be ARC there, a lot of ARC. And if it's just on the surface, yeah, it's just messed. Theta
Yeah.
is where is at. You have that connection. That connection is everything.
Mm-hmm.
That ARC, that KRC, to me, that's my answer. What's yours?
Well, I think you kind of leaned into it a little bit when you were saying about, like, when a person has integrity. To me, sex is a outcome, not a
Yeah,
goal,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so when we put in the time, the communication, the affection, the understanding, the ARC, and knowing each other or whatever, when we put that in, to me, it's almost like you said, that magnetism, where it's like, I just want to touch you. I just want to kiss you. I just want to hold you. I just want to make love to you, whatever it is.
Yeah,
I want to be with you.
yeah, in
Right.
your
And to
space.
Right, right. And so to me, sex is a culmination of all those theta quality encounters with each other, and
Mhm.
then boom, our body just smashed together as much as possible, right?
Right, which is
And
occupying the same space per the axioms. Is you're trying to
that's the
occupy the
highest
same space
affinity.
because I dig you, baby. Yeah.
Yes, yes. But when it's just based on you're using the term aesthetics, but I don't know if you're out at a bar having some drinks or whatever, and you see this beautiful girl, and yes, she might be physically has these characteristics, right? But is that true aesthetics? Because aesthetics is a bandwidth. Aesthetics
Hmm.
is a
Yeah.
frequency, as it were.
Right.
And what ends up happening is she might have certain characteristics, body, shape, blah blah blahs, blah blah blahs, whatever, right? She
Hmm.
might have all these things, or they might have all these qualities that you look for in a potential mate. But is it true aesthetics, or is it more like collecting bodies, which is on
Yeah.
the other
Right. And
side?
yeah, which is way down on the right on the tone scale. Is controlling bodies. Yeah,
Yes.
that's a differentiation you have to make, and you've got to be honest with yourself. Is this messed or is this theta? And
Yes.
the longest
There it is. Right.
relationships, yeah, the longest relationships that you see people who they met in high school or elementary school and they're married their whole lives and everything like that. By far, it's theta. It's not messed
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
theta is ARC, theta is KRC, and the physical attributes are nice, but you have to balance these things out and go, okay, what's what really is what is it that I'm looking for here? Is it a one night stand, or and
Hmm.
that goes back to where did you meet them? If you meet somebody in a bar, well, again, stop before you start. Chances are you're not going to meet anybody of any high caliber or high tone level in a bar. Whereas if you met them at a book club and you'd gone to the book club for a couple of months and you've gotten to know them and and all that stuff, or someplace where you have ARC for things, or you met them at an independent church, Scientology or something like that. Okay, good start. Or you met them at a
Yeah.
Catholic church. Good start. Because
I
that's ARC.
Yeah. I typically tell people, and I've been doing a lot of coaching and stuff that I do in my business. And I typically tell people, if you're meeting somebody along your third dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to bring them into your second dynamic.
Yes, it
But if you're
is.
meeting this random stranger at a bar who's a fourth dynamic, a human being that you've never met before, you don't know her family, you don't know her friends, you don't know her counterparts, you don't know that. Like, if you don't know these people, then that's a whole different. Like, you have to move that
Yeah.
person a little bit further down the track. And I'm
Yeah.
using that as an example, but it's not like that. But that's how I see it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, if I met you in a third dynamic flow, if we met because we might go to church together, or I know you're a Scientologist or whatever. If we met because we are part of the same Toastmasters group or something like that, right? If we met because we have similar business dealings, and I'm a lawyer and you're a paralegal, or vice versa. Like, if we met along those lines somewhere, and we are able to connect from that at that point, and then build ARC so much that we can't help but be in each other's space.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a very A to B kind of engagement with a person, and you kind of start to create this second dynamic flow, and you invite them into your second dynamic, you invite them into your bedroom, you invite them into your life, you have them meet your family, your parents, or whatever, and vice versa. And then you guys decide, maybe we want to be together, get married, we decide we want to have kids, we want to start our own family, whatever it is. Like, so it becomes this very healthy, non-toxic, that's the word we used before,
Mm-hmm.
non-toxic kind of engagement, this kind of flow. And if if it flows like that, if it opens up that way, I think you can really trust on some level that this is a workable foundation, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a workable way of going about connecting with somebody. So yeah. But there's a difference between aesthetics, and aesthetics,
Right.
right?
Right. Well, yeah, you can eliminate a lot of the variables between those two types based off of, like you said, from a third dynamic viewpoint. If you're meeting them in a third dynamic zone, well, then you've
Yeah,
eliminated the variables because you already have something in common. You have a common reality. Whereas if
sure.
you just met them on the street and you said, can I have your number? You haven't eliminated any variables at all,
Right.
at all.
N-
And then
Now,
that's not good.
I'm not afraid to do that now. I've been plenty of times. I've been like, "Hey, what's up?" You know what I'm saying?
Girl, what's your
With a random
name?
stranger, right? But that was coming from the aesthetics
Aesthetics, right.
perspective.
Right, right.
Aesthetics,
So you're already
ASX.
you're already behind, maybe. That was a pun. You're already behind.
Exactly.
So
Oh my gosh.
lastly, we've got children, which is the product of sex.
Yes,
And this is what this
absolutely.
is this is all about, because to the degree that you're in ARC and KRC with your spouse and you've agreed, okay, well, we want to have some kids, is to the degree that you're on the same page on the second dynamic and you're giving it a go. And
Hmm.
there are tons and tons of references on how to deal with children from an independent Scientologist standpoint, and granting them beingness, listening to them, acknowledging them,
Mm-hmm.
treating them as a being, not treating them as a child. For obvious reasons, you can't do that with an infant or anything like that. But it is terribly, terribly important to be affinitive and not expect things of children that you would expect of adults, and to understand that their viewpoint is significantly different than an
Right.
adult's. You've got to take that into consideration. That's, as a father of five, I always talk to my kids as if they were a friend. I didn't talk down to them. I granted them beingness and had conversations with them and asked them what they thought. I'd just ask them about a business matter. What do you think? What would you do in this situation? And it was always really interesting to get their viewpoints on that. And there were many times where they gave me excellent, excellent advice, even when they were in elementary school. And it was interesting after the hormones get into their system in the teens, how things would change. And then when they became adults, they changed back again to when they were in elementary school, because those hormones, they kick up some restimulation in the case. So, and you got to be understanding of that too when they're teenagers, that there's an awful lot of chemicals going on there for several years, and you need to understand that their viewpoints are going to be different from that, and understand that they have needs and desires, and grant them beingness and trust, and give them more responsibility. Always give
Yes.
give kids responsible, make sure that they have chores to do, that they get an allowance, they can contribute, and don't do the you should be seen and not heard thing. That is awful to do to a child. You've got to let them communicate and acknowledge them. Axiom 28 is the way to go on communication. This is some of
Mm-hmm.
my advice. You've got any?
Yeah, well, so for my son is 21 now, and for him, we had a few different things. So I told him that I'm here for you. I got you no matter what. But if I take care of your needs, and you let me know what you want, right? I take care of
Right.
your needs, you let me know what you want. And when he would want something, I said, my promise to you, this is what I told him. My promise to you is I will never tell you no. I will always ask you how when it comes to
Right.
something you want.
Right.
I will never tell you no. I
CSW
will
it.
always ask you how. Yeah. And so he'll say, "Oh, Dad, I want a PlayStation or whatever. I want a PS5 or whatever." And I'd be like, "Okay, how you gonna get it?"
Hmm.
Um, I was gonna ask you for the money. And I'd be like, "Okay, well, how you gonna pay me back? Because I don't want a PlayStation or whatever, right? That was my
Right.
thing or whatever." And I was like, I was like, I didn't come to you saying I want a PlayStation. You came to me. So how if you want it, how you gonna get it? And I would make him think about what was required. I will make him think about how this thing was going to manifest in his reality. I will make him figure it out. And so one day he said, "Oh, I can go out and maybe cut grass." And I said, "Okay, that's a wonderful idea. We got a lawnmower, do your thing." And so he went out over a weekend, and the PlayStation was it wasn't a PS5, it was like a PS3 or PS4 at the time, and he it was like $500. He went out and he garnered $406 in one weekend cutting grass.
Mm.
I was blown. He was 12-year-old making $400 in a weekend. You know what I mean? And I was like, wow, this is so fantastic. And so I went ahead and fronted him the other $100 or whatever it was, and went ahead and got him the PlayStation. But it was just impressive that he was able to manufacture that energy and that fortitude and that go get itness and that those qualities that you look for, and you want to inculcate in your children, right?
Right.
And so little things like that. Other thing, and I'll be done. We had was when he turned 13. I told him, now that you're a teenager, now that you're 13, I said, no more Christmas gifts. I said, instead of Christmas gifts, you get Christmas trips. We're doing the
Hmm.
Christmas trips.
Hmm.
So from 13 until 18, we would do Christmas trips. So we would go to different locations. We would go to different, and his Christmas list, as it were, was countries. I
Hmm.
said, for your birthday, you can still get what you want for your birthday. I'll give you a gift for your birthday, whatever. Just put down some stuff you want on the list. I said, but for holidays, I want you to write down countries. And he told me he was 15, and he says, "I want to go to Dominican Republic." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Why you want to go there?" He's like, "Dad, have you seen the women?" I was like, "The boy, if you don't go sit down somewhere, have you seen the women?" I was like, "Oh my God." So these are different things that we could do in our flows to kind of get a better experience with children. And there's definitely a uh, payoff, I'll say.
Hmm.
There's definitely a payoff when you have a good relationship with your children and you're able to, take it to that level. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, experience is by far the best, and you're not gonna always do everything right with your first one or your second one, but you
Right.
got, if you have the tech, you got the second dynamic book, you got the auditor tech, you got the axioms and things like that. My dad was telling me the axioms when I was 4 years old, and I had to memorize some
Right.
of the axioms and stuff like that. And it really helped. So get in calm with them, talk to them about the subjects of Scientology and everything, and find out where they're coming from on it, and don't push them on it. They can believe whatever they want to believe. What's true for them is true for them. And that's how you raise a kid, and they're not all going to
Yeah.
be interested in what you're interested in, and you have to accept that, because different beings, I mean, just because they have your genetics, they're a completely different being than you are, and you've got to remember that it's a luck of the draw on tone level and what kind of a being you get, but you should love them unconditionally in my book. So for Quentin Stroud and myself, we're a little bit over an hour here. We're going to get going. We'll see you next week. Coming up with some really interesting podcasts that we've got slated for you. Make sure you go to the website, check out our success stories, um, read some books, sign up for some auditing, do a personality test, ao-gp.org. We've got a new YouTube channel where you can listen to these podcasts. Go in and listen to them on there. Uh, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate that. Would help us get the word out to other people that don't know we exist, and get us out of non-existence on YouTube. So we'd very much appreciate your help and assistance there. So for myself and Quentin, we will bid you adieu. Namaste, and we love you.
Peace.